Hello, and thank you so much for joining us today for this panel on brand building in a signal-driven world. I'm Peter Adams. I'm a reporter for the trade publication Marketing Dive, and I'm going to be moderating this upcoming session. Before we get into the fine details here, I know they just got a short introduction, but if we don't mind going down the line and have everyone just give a quick explainer about who you are and what you do at your organization.
Hi, I'm Belliveau. I lead the large customer team at Snap. I've been there for 11 months, and I come previously from Reddit and the old Twitter before that, and I was a longtime Googler. And I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Hi, and I'm Cheryl Guerin. I lead our brand strategy and innovation, and I have the pleasure of spearheading our priceless marketing effort and campaign for many years now, and I'm thrilled to be here with all of you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kelsey Philpott, SVP Group Director at Major League Baseball. I oversee brands, culture, lifestyle, marketing, digital, media, creative, and design globally for America's oldest sport, Major League Baseball.
Well, I think the kind of panel logline today is a great encapsulation of kind of what Cannes become about. You have on the one hand brand building, this is the festival celebrating creativity, and then on the other side you have the signal-driven world. I think we all know data, tech have played a much bigger role in the show. But just to wind things back a little bit, signals is kind of a blanket term in a way. As a journalist, I think of it as shorthand for data a lot of the time. But I'm wondering if you all could just give a very brief definition of what you consider signals, again, kind of starting with you, Marianne, and then maybe working down the line.
Why don't you go first, since you're down there?
Go for it. I mean, a signal is any type of insight, right, that you could grab in and enable you to create marketing that connects to be more relevant, to drive more action in real time. Or it could be a trend even that gives you a sense of where you need to move your brand. It could be spending data, of course, which is something we look at as well. So it's any signal that could give you a clue on how to understand and decipher what a customer need is.
Yeah, just to expand on that, I think we both have expansive data enterprises. It's more than data. It's an insight that, for us, signals a tipping point where behavior is about to change, because there's a lot of data and it can lead you in a lot of different places if you interpret it wrong. And so oftentimes we're looking to find that point just before early adoption so that we can adjust accordingly. That, to us, is what we consider a signal.
So we're trying to mix up the order a little bit to keep it interesting. I think signals, especially on Snapchat, a lot of our really powerful signals are private because they occur in the chat. And so we're paying a lot of attention to trying to understand the signals of, like, in the chat when you're like shopping and you're snapping a picture of an outfit before you buy it, or shoes, or what have you. So understanding the signals, I think of it more as, like, I feel like the whole industry almost over-indexed on data for a while, and it became so, like, dry and boring. And I think now this is the first year in quite a while where the Festival of Creativity is actually, like, really celebrating creativity and the fact that connecting with brands and the things that you want to buy as a consumer are just all part of your life, and that we all need things, we all want things, and we should think of advertising more as, like, connecting the dots of the moments of our life, so that it's about taking the technology out in the world with us instead of being so, like, in it in this way. And so we think of the signals as more of moments to, like, pivot to make sure the message and the connection is the right one.
Yeah, I'll build on that a little bit. And, before I do, you all come from, fairly different organizations in terms of where they sit, kind of in the marketing and media worlds. But I imagine a mandate for all of you is trying to balance, the sort of short and the long term of brand initiatives and where signals play into that. Marianne, for you, I think of Snapchat as, a big piece of it is as the sort of ephemeral messaging platform. You could tell me a little bit more about, how do you help brands capitalize on that sort of those real time and fleeting moments maybe, while also sort of being aligned with their longer term goals?
Yeah, it's a bit of a trickier science, right? Because instead of trying to find an inanimate moment, you're trying to connect in the moments where people are living their lives, right? Because Snapchat is all about communicating with your friends and family, and people are coming to the platform like 30, 40 times a day. So we're trying to make sure in those moments of life that's when we're connecting like with the right message. And so it's not always super linear. And we're trying to do more work to understand the insights that we're gleaning from like the My AI in terms of what people are interested in and looking for, and kind of what some of the behaviors are that people are finding like joy from, because it's also a platform that makes people happy and they report they feel joyful, right? So they're spending time on Snap because they are spending time like living their life and being with their friends and family. So I think we think of that in ways that are a little bit less linear, but we look for the signals that are at that moment that matter to make sure that the creative message reaches somebody when they're receptive to it and open to it.
Sort of a similar question for you, Kelsey, thinking about how dynamic live sports can be, the real time, the fleeting moments, the unscripted moments. How do you think about signals as a way to identify those things that pop up that are surprising that you want to amplify versus kind of maybe let lie and build a little organically over time?
Yeah, I think this is where, for us and other brands, it's really important to lean into your brand strategy and your brand platform. We have a wonderful brand platform called Baseball is Something Else. And it's meant to describe both the expected and unexpected elements of Major League Baseball. The expected is, we all know, it's the rich history and tradition of the sport that goes back 150 years, but also the unexpected, the new personality and flavor in the game, the cultural connections across food and music and fashion and art and film that many people don't think about. You think about the way that baseball, for example, has just impacted language that people use. We do it every day in our vernacular, home runs and strikeouts. You could get off an airplane in 196 countries as designated by the United Nations, and within 5 minutes see a New York Yankees or LA Dodgers hat, right? So it's truly something else. But the challenge is, and it's much like the Priceless brand platform, it requires contextual relevance and definition. And so we have to go in with our opening day campaign, No Place Like Home, Baseball is Something Else, and provide a meaning to the campaign. And that's what enables us to interpret signals that come in the live and unscripted environment and contextualize them for fans. So it's not just a random moment that pops up and we don't know what to do with it. We go, okay, think about the latest movement, tarps off. 17 to 20-year-old boys, largely in southern states, that are rallying in the bleacher seats. They're taking their shirts or their tarps off and they're waving them above their heads. That is a definition of baseball as something else. It's unexpected. And when you put it within that context, it makes more sense for the fan base, but it also allows us to create consistency of branding, which benefits not only us, but our partners like Mastercard.
The contextual relevance piece of things is something I've heard so much about at Cannes so far this week. Marianne or Cheryl, have you heard anything really interesting on the contextual front that sort of popped out to you?
Why don't you, on the contextual front?
On the context, you talked about this Priceless from the beginning. Here we are nearly 30 years later, and it's about being contextually relevant and insightful every day. The insight that was true 30 years ago, that experiences matter more than things, that people were moving from materialism and consumption-focused values to the intangibles in life. This has only become more and more resonant. And I think about what we did then. So if I compare what we did then, our very first Priceless commercial was a father and a son at a Major League Baseball stadium. It was always for us about being functional and emotional. At the time it was, you can now use your card at the stadium, which sounds ancient, right? That you could actually pay with a card in stadium. But what the ad was about was those purchases, the popcorn, the hot dog, the souvenir, led to real conversation with 11-year-old son. what was your insight that, nobody really wants to talk about that you're losing sort of the relationship with your kids as they get older. And, it's the heart of that hasn't changed, but today we can use different contexts, social listening. We could use our spend data to understand what's going on in the world and in real time serve up offerings. So we could see trends that are happening in a number of pieces of data. And then, we see the passion, we saw talk going on around a particular trend in baseball, we can immediately serve up within 15 minutes a new campaign that speaks to the priceless experiences you could have with our baseball partnership.
Yeah. I think too, like it's an interesting topic that you hit on, because I actually think it's the thread of commonality, right, between the three of us in terms of the company's kind of like mission and vibe, right, which is it's all about human connection and celebrating the important moments of life. And so I think for so long people thought technology was so like other, right, and not part of life. And it was very disruptive. And now we're really at a moment, an inflection point where technology and the businesses that we're all in are about celebrating like these magical moments of time with your family and friends, and what that meaning is. And that meaning is never more important than when you're in person with somebody, or you're chatting with them, or you're texting with them, and you're connecting, and you're going to go somewhere, and you're going to do something. And we see like a lot, especially like on our map, so many people are scrolling our map to see like what's going on and who's where, and like where should I go and what should I do. And it's bringing people together, I think, in a way that I think we all celebrate in terms of our company's missions and goals.
Cheryl, I wanted to dig a little more into Priceless as well. Such a long-standing, immediately recognizable brand platform, and you were just talking about some of the very human advertising you've done for it, but also how over time it's evolved to factor in all sorts of different sort of signal sources. How do you kind of preserve the sort of foundational connective element, the human element there, as you do get all these new tools where you could probably technically refine it within an inch of its life, or some mathematical equation?
Yeah, it's so funny. I heard Neely talk about outcomes before. Like everybody from a marketing standpoint wants an outcome that's related to business. It's funny, when we talk about Priceless, it's always an outcome. This led to an outcome that was meaningful in your life, small or big. And, we follow that formula. So even if we're using technology, we look at, again, that contextual relevance and that storytelling. How do we put that together? So what's an example of that? I just did my real time. I think of your platform as well, our ability to let people in real time engage, whether that's... whether we have a geo signal where we could serve up a particular offer, somebody lands in a particular country and you could get them the experiences in that country right when they land. So geo-targeted, spend data. By the way, we look at our spend data to determine what's starting to happen and trends in new sponsorship areas, in new experience areas that we need to get involved in. We were the first sponsor of League of Legends, from a global esport play. So we're constantly looking at cultural cues, cultural signals, as well as our spend data, as well as, just understanding people in culture, what matters to them. And this is how we continually preserve this platform, find new and surprising ways all the time to bring it to market.
I'm glad you brought up like cultural signals kind of leading you to these new spaces that are driving impact. I think, turning back again to the sort of theme of the panel and the CAN kind of brand building versus, data-driven marketing or signal-driven marketing, those are things that are often positioned as maybe being in tension with each other, or people think creativity, maybe has lost a little bit of its sight, and an overcorrection towards the signal side of things. But I wanted to talk to you all about like the ways where signals are maybe enabling like a little more flexibility or opening some new avenues. Like Cheryl, for you, in terms of how you activate priceless, you mentioned, the League of Legends partnership, but are there other sort of occasions that go beyond what you think of as like kind of just traditional advertising brand platform work where signals are kind of leading you?
Yeah, so like I'll go back to the spend data now. I mean, at the end of the day, if you look at the spend that's happening on dining, it's an incredible amount, and we saw, then you marry that with the cultural cue, like the chefs became rock stars. This is now a while ago, right? And the shows started taking off. Everybody wanted to experience this, and we stood up a roster of chefs around the world. We stood up a scaled dining platform that told people, actually, we did this with Major League Baseball. We run a long-standing Stand Up to Cancer program. When you dine out and use your Mastercard, we donate to Stand Up to Cancer. And then every year we go on at the World Series and All-Star Game, and we talk about all the people that went out, that dined out, and we connect it back to things, again, that matter, that they care about in their lives. And so, we're constantly looking at what's the next signal. We haven't done anything with this yet, but I'm just incredibly, you look at what's happening with Mahjong right now. It's incredible. Live events, live experiences, real life, you watch what's happening. The loneliness factor that's happening is connecting people back to coming together in real life. And we all have the ability to actually connect with people, through technology platforms, but in real life in a meaningful way.
Kelsey, I wanted to ask you, we're talking about things that have a big presence here at Cannes. It's live sports, not just Cannes, but having an incredible year overall, such a dynamic space, working within one of the major leagues. Like, how do you use signals to figure out what's a league story, what's a team story? How do you make those things kind of gel together? Particularly thinking about how sports is also a space that's become more and more fragmented. Obviously, it's a huge anchor for traditional media, but I also know it's diversified into all these other areas as well.
Yeah, I think this is where we see again in marketing, classically, there's some tension or opposition between the notion of ownership and collaboration. We prefer to think of it not as this is a league story or this is a team story or this is a player story. We would never want to put our players in a position where they can't drive their own narrative or have their own voice out there. In fact, our role is most often to amplify that. It's really about the whole ecosystem coming together, and there are different roles. There might be a primary or a lead, and there might be a secondary or support role. The example I just shared about tarps off with the kids whipping their heads, 500 at a time out in the outfield at our games is largely a team story. We're going to support and amplify that, but that is a relationship the teams have with those fans. They're doing great work around creating ticketing offers and sections so those fans can gather together and take their tarps off and wave them to their heart's content. But there are other signals and trends that we view not necessarily as fads or things of the moment, but long-term shifts in behavior that will take primary leadership over. So I'll give you an example. Our relationship with New Era. We're seeing now an adjacent trend similar to sneaker culture emerging with hatwear, where there is a custom element to hatwear and all different types of hats, from the fitted caps to the snapbacks and in between, where designs are proliferating in and around our traditional marks and logos. That's something that we are choosing to lead in partnership largely with New Era, with support from the teams and players. And you better believe the players are in there because they're all into fashion and they can inform that. But it's an example of how we try and leverage the whole ecosystem to promote something within, I would say, some loose swim laning.
Marianne, on your end, you have a wide view into what advertisers are kind of like activating around, and I imagine especially in the sort of messaging and social sphere, there's a lot of fast changing trends, contexts that they want to capitalize on. How do you see them kind of using the signals at their disposal to kind of plus up their creativity and ensure that they are tapping into the right spaces on Snap?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, right? I think for many years, right, brands were advertising at and to people in a somewhat static way, right? And there was a lot of years where it became apparent that people wanted the brands to talk back to them, and the brands were like, "No, thank you." And there were some brands who would embrace it, and other brands who were a little more hesitant. And I think that what is so actually interesting about it is that now it's become so much more dynamic. And so when you have the signal, it just makes sense, right? Like you're like, oh, this person is interested in this thing right now at this moment in their life. So like, duh, like this is the time to actually like send them a message that like makes sense in this moment, like whatever that is. And it's like more joyful, and it just makes it really interesting. We're actually also doing a lot of like outdoor executions right now, which we keep getting asked to do, and we're trying to figure out how to do it better at scale. But we recently did one with HBO for House of Dragons in Times Square, where we had this like whole experience where you could go up to the Snap Mirror and then you were like on a billboard in Times Square in the House of Dragons like thing, and it was like super cool. But it was just like people want to be part of these brands, and so it seems like the brands themselves have gotten to a point where they're like, oh, okay, yeah, we should talk to them. We do want to talk to them. And it's not just about what they buy but it's actually about like the experience of like what they buy, when they buy it, when they need it, and why they need it. And so it's more about like understanding their life and like how they're going through their life. And I think for consumers, they appreciate it so much more, and it's so much more powerful when brands actually do pay attention to the signals. And you know, AI is helping that so much, because we're also able to, like as you were saying, on the fly, just create something that is going to be specifically in tune with that moment at that moment.
Yeah. Does the rise of AI stuff, though, you know, you have access to so many more maybe predictive capabilities and things like that, you know, does it make it more difficult to identify the trends that are going to be something tangible or valuable? Does it make it easier? Yeah. I just feel like, the amount of noise that could potentially be out there maybe intensifies in some respects, but I don't know.
Well, I think it's interesting because our whole industry is very leaned in, right, with AI, and the average person, if you ask them, like the sentiment is somewhat negative. And it's because it's something new and people are a little wary of it, and they're like, is this going to mean no one's going to have a job and all the things? And what we're seeing is like, you know, that won't happen. But I think today, instead of like that aspect of trends, it's just more able to help identify like, how do we respond in the moment quickly to something in a way that makes sense? We're not really using it to tell us like what's going on per se. But I think that the ability of these models to like think and process things will help in certain areas. And I think that it depends how you're using it and like kind of how you're thinking about it. But from a creative perspective, I think the speed and the flexibility is super important.
We've really embraced it, and it started. Now this is pre-Gen AI. You know, we were using AI. We basically took in all the social signals, and we track the passion categories and things that are going on in people's lives. And we use that as part of our everyday social strategy, organic, could be paid. And it gives us a signal of where we should turn a campaign on. Trend is going up. And as soon as we could see the trend is going down, we pull the campaign down. And so we have, again, before Gen AI, you lined up the creative in the background. This particular passion lit up. We actually served the ad, and we moved quickly. You know, in the world of Gen AI, now you can actually deliver ads in a much quicker way, change the copy, et cetera. And the other way I think it's enhancing, we look at AI and say, this is where personalization can take hold. So now we could get even more contextually relevant, slightly different than what we're talking about in the signal world. But one signal, of course, is people want more personalization. And it's a little broader of a trend, but, we did something called AI Card Designer. And so relinquishing our creative control, handing it over to consumers or small businesses to create their own card designs. So we've embraced, and what is that going to do? It creates an emotional connection to your card. And by the way, if we know that somebody did this awesome design around MLB, they're passionate, we'll make sure they use your proper rights and IP. When they do that, you know we can serve up then different ways of offering benefits and experiences once they do that as well. So we're embracing it and using it wherever we can, as a tool for personalization.
Yeah, I think it's like any new technology. There are pros and cons. We are seeing in the early days of our adoption the ability for AI to help us in the performance space more effectively and efficiently, move media around and dollars and creative around to get to the right target audience to drive greater returns, for example, in the ticket sales space. Conversely, we are at times frustrated by the constantly accelerating change in the algorithms of our social platforms and making sure that we're serving content to fans in the right way, in the right format per the algorithm at the moment. And we've never seen this rapid pace of change. So it's like anything else. We are dealing with it in real time, but so far net additive, I would say.
I wanted to ask a little bit about like fandom and audience and how that ties into signals. Like I think about the MLB, what a rich legacy it has there. How do you maintain appeal with, kind of older fans while also, like you said, keeping tabs on this newer generation that's more digitally native, that's maybe more linear averse, but still getting more invested in the sport?
Yeah, I think if you were to look at our fan base from the most avid to the non-fans, and you were to strip away their consumption and look at them as human beings, the key to this for us is shared interests. Whether you're an avid fan that's going to 81 home games a year and watching the other 81 on MLB.tv, or you're a non-fan that knows about baseball but doesn't really care, you're a human being. You have interests, music, fashion, food, art, and this is where I come back to what I said earlier. From a cultural perspective, we really feel it's a competitive advantage for Major League Baseball relative to the other sports competitive set because we have such deeply interwoven, authentic ties to culture, right? Ballpark food as an example, and it's something that our friends at Mastercard have been with us and building with us from the ground up, is probably the best example now. We're building a branded engagement platform out of the food experience that you have at our ballparks, as defined by any food that you could have at a ballpark or any food experienced at a ballpark. And so whether you're an avid fan or a casual fan or a non-fan, you have an interest. And so it allows us to deepen our engagement with our avid fans, but also reach out to the net new fans that have no interest. And I'll give you an example. The New York Yankees have a wonderful dish. If you're ever in New York, go to a game and try it. It's tiramisu in an upside-down batter's helmet. You might not be a baseball fan, but you're a foodie, and you got an Instagram account. You buy a bleacher seat. You go buy your tiramisu in an upside-down batter's helmet. You sit in the bleachers, take your Instagram selfie, you post it online, and somewhere along the line, ninth inning, Aaron Judge, it's a 2-run homer, walks off the game. Not only have we brought you to a ball game and met you where you are in your point of interest, but we probably just made a new baseball fan, right? If you're not a diehard fan in that moment, you're probably going home and following Aaron online because he's a 6'7" behemoth, mountain of a man, and that is interesting. You might be buying a hat on the way out. You might be tuning into Yes Network. And so for us, that's how we bridge the gap. We never want to besmirch our avid fans. They give us our life and our blood, but we have to grow the game. And so it's through these shared interests, and culture is our greatest opportunity there. And for work partners like MasterCard, we wouldn't be able to stand a lot of this up.
Thinking about the sort of shared interests topic, where things intersect, what's kind of buzzing. I think about Snapchat has such a kind of unique window into Gen Z in particular. Can you talk about, what you think your kind of advantages there when it comes to the signal world and how advertisers are so hungry to reach that kind of new generation?
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. I'm a parent of 3 Gen Z kids, and I think that we have seen, right, the data shows that people are moving away from publicly posting, right, and they're moving to more private spaces. The Gen Zers are more in tune with their privacy, and I see that with my own kids, and so I feel like the chat application of Snap, which is the most popular part of the platform, has become so important to that generation. But I think from like how they interact with the world perspective and the fandoms that they create, it's also interesting as a parent to see like the communities that come out of the fandoms. Like my kids, we all saw the Star Wars movies together, so when they were Star Wars fans, like that, I totally got. Marvel, totally got. But when my daughter became an F1 fan, I was like, wait, well, how did that happen? Where did that happen? How did I not know? Like, where did you become an F1 fan? And then my boys became huge NBA fans, and I was like, wait, where did that happen? How did that happen? This is so interesting. Like, and then I think Snap also provides the communities where the creators and the people that they're following, it becomes a community where it's like I had the opportunity to interview two of the guys from Love Island last year, and my daughter was like completely losing her mind. And I hadn't seen the show, but the community on Snap was so robust, and it was the creators on Snap are a little different. It's not like the polished, perfect image always. It's like the day-to-day, like I'm putting on my shoes, I'm going to the store, I'm doing the things, I'm getting dressed, I'm buying my stuff. And so people feel like they know you because they do. They're like part of your everyday. And then those fandoms become like a little different, and they can become like more community-based in like really interesting ways, which I think is kind of unique in some ways to Gen Z.
I'm also very glad you mentioned House of the Dragon earlier. That's top of my list to catch up on when I get back from France. Cheryl, we've already talked a little bit about how signals have brought you into some new spaces like the gaming space with League of Legends. Are there any other sort of surprises when you think about Mastercard's intersection with these different cultural industry fixtures, whether it's dining, where you've unlocked some new insight because you do have access to this type of information?
The access to the data, or what'd you say? Because we have access to.
Just like through like the signal-driven work you do, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, like, we're constantly looking, even in things we're in, whether it's baseball or golf or entertainment, we're constantly looking at new cultural signals and what's going on. We're looking at who's likely going to be the next artist to blow up. Then you actually get them before they cost huge, giant amounts of money, and you invest with them and they become your real, authentic partner. And things like entertainment, we're constantly looking. So I find it interesting, like we all saw this happen. Again, I mentioned before this loneliness sort of, thing, like this heavy world that we're all in. People are trying to escape. Live events do that, but then now you started to see people desiring to escape into their favorite shows. So you saw what happened with White Lotus when people wanted to travel to that destination and experience it. So we quickly looked at this as an opportunity, and we partnered with the likes of Netflix on their experiences, their live experiences. So they opened up 2 Netflix houses where you can actually immerse yourself in Bridgerton or Squid Game, and we literally created a custom set of experiences. You could play Squid Game, you get the tracksuit, you do the whole thing, but you don't die at the end, of course.
Right.
And we're bringing these unique set of experiences, and it happens to also be where people are spending their money, right? In streaming, in entertainment, in travel, to go experience these things. And so, we sort of line up all those things, what's happening in spend, what's happening in culture, but it's a constant monitoring of what's coming next. And we look at it all the time, and we make decisions and trade-offs on how we're going to address it. Do we think it's really going to scale? We test a bunch and we see if it moves the needle for us. But we're constantly looking at keeping it fresh.
Well, we're running out of time here, so I just wanted to thank you all again for being up on stage here with me and sharing your insights on signal-driven marketing with this audience.
Wait, and can we thank you, Peter? How great was he with all the good questions? Thank you.
Thank
Thank you so much.